Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is from chapter 271. Chapter 271. After the execution, Pierre was separated from the rest of the prisoners and placed alone in a small, ruined, and befouled church. Toward evening, a non-commissioned officer entered with 2 soldiers and told him that he had been pardoned and would now go to the barracks for the prisoners of war. Without understanding what was said to him, Pierre got up and went with the soldiers. They took him to the upper end of the field, where there were some sheds built of charred planks, beams, and battens, and led him into one of them. In the darkness, some 20 different men surrounded Pierre. He looked at them without understanding who they were, why they were there, or what they wanted of him. He heard what they said, but did not understand the meaning of the words, and made no kind of deduction from or application of them. He replied to questions they put to him, but did not consider who was listening to his replies, nor how they would understand them. He looked at their faces and figures, but they all seemed to him equally meaningless. From the moment Pierre had witnessed those terrible murders committed by men who did not wish to commit them, it was as if the mainspring of his life, on which everything depended and which made everything appear alive, had suddenly been wrenched out, and everything had collapsed into a heap of meaningless rubbish. Though he did not acknowledge it to himself, his faith in the right ordering of the universe, in humanity, in his own soul, and in God, had been destroyed. He had experienced this before, but never so strongly as now. When similar doubts had assailed him before, they had been the result of his own wrongdoing, and at the bottom of his heart he had felt that relief from his despair and from those doubts was to be found within himself. But now he felt that the universe had crumbled before his eyes, and only meaningless ruins remained, and this not by the fault of his own. He felt that it was not in his power to regain faith in the meaning of life. Around him in the darkness, men were standing, and evidently something about him interested them greatly. They were telling him something, and asking him something. Then they led him away somewhere, and at last he found himself in a corner of the shed among men who were laughing and talking on all sides. "Well then, mates, the very prince who—" some voice at the other end of the shed was saying, with a strong emphasis on the word who. Sitting silent and motionless on a heap of straw against the wall, Pierre sometimes opened and sometimes closed his eyes. But as soon as he closed them, he saw before him the dreadful face of the factory lad, especially dreadful because of its simplicity, and the faces of the murderers, even more dreadful because of their disquiet. And he opened his eyes again and stared vacantly into the darkness around him. Beside him, in a stooping position, sat a small man, of whose presence he was first made aware by a strong smell of perspiration, which came from him every time he moved. This man was doing something to his legs in the darkness, and though Pierre could not see his face, he felt that the man continually glanced at him. On growing used to the darkness, Pierre saw that the man was taking off his leg bands, and the way he did it aroused Pierre's interest. Having unwound the string that tied the band on one leg, he carefully coiled it up and immediately began to work on the other leg, glancing up at Pierre. While one hand hung up the first string, the other was already unwinding the band on the second leg. In this way, having carefully removed the leg bands by deft circular motions of his arm following one another uninterruptedly, the man hung the leg bands up on some pegs fixed above his head. Then he took out a knife, cut something, closed the knife, placed it under the head of his bed, and, seating himself comfortably, clasped his arms around his knees and fixed his eyes on Pierre. The latter was conscious of something pleasant, comforting, and well-rounded in these deft movements, and the man's well-ordered arrangements in his corner, and even among his very smell, and he looked at the man without taking his eyes from him. "You've seen a lot of trouble, sir, eh?" the little man suddenly said. And there was so much kindliness and simplicity in his sing-song voice that Pierre tried to reply, but his jaw trembled and he felt tears rising to his eyes. The little fellow, giving Pierre no time to betray his confusion, instantly continued in the same pleasant tones. Lad, don't fret," said he, in the tender sing-song caressing voice old Russian peasant women employ. "Don't fret, friend. Suffer an hour, live for an age. That's how it is, my dear fellow. And here we live, thank heaven, without offense. Among these folk, too, there are good men as well as bad," said he, and still speaking, he turned on his knees with a supple movement, got up, coughed, and went off to another part of the shed. "Ah, you rascal," Pierre heard the same kind voice saying at the other end of the shed. "So you've come, you rascal. She remembers. Now, that will do." And the soldier, pushing away a little dog that was jumping up at him, returned to his place and sat down. In his hands he had something wrapped in a rag. "Here, eat a bit, sir," said he, resuming his formal, respectful tone as he unwrapped and offered Pierre some baked potatoes. "We had soup for dinner, and the potatoes are grand." Pierre had not eaten all day, and the smell of the potatoes seemed extremely pleasant to him. He thanked the soldier and began to eat. "Well, are they all right?" said the soldier with a smile. "You should do like this." He took a potato, drew out his clasp knife, cut the potato into 2 equal halves on the palm of his hand, sprinkled some salt on it from the rag, and handed it to Pierre. "The potatoes are grand," he said once more. "Eat some like that." Pierre thought he had never eaten anything that tasted better. "Oh, I'm all right," said he. "But why did they shoot those poor fellows? That last one was hardly 20. "Tst, tst," said the little man. "Ah, what a sin, what a sin," he added quickly. And as if his words were always waiting ready in his mouth and flew out involuntarily, he went on. "How was it, sir, that you stayed in Moscow?" "I didn't think they would come so soon. I stayed accidentally," replied Pierre. "And how did they arrest you, dear lad? At your house?" "No. I went to look at the fire, and they arrested me there, and tried me as an incendiary." "Where there's law, there's injustice," put in the little man. "And have you been here long?" Pierre asked as he munched the last of the potato. "I? It was last Sunday they took me out of a hospital in Moscow." "Why, are you a soldier then?" "Yes. We are soldiers of the Aspsheron regiment. I was dying of fever. We weren't told anything. There were some 20 of us lying there. We had no idea, never guessed at all." "And do you feel sad here?" Pierre inquired. "How can one help it, lad? My name is Platon, and the surname is Karatiev," he added, evidently wishing to make it easier for Pierre to address him. "They call me Little Falcon in the regiment." "How is one to help feeling sad? Moscow, she's the mother of cities. How can one see all this and not feel sad? But the maggot gnaws the cabbage, yet dies first. That's what the old folks used to tell us," he added rapidly. "What? What did you say?" asked Pierre. "Who, I?" said Karatiev. "I say things happen not as we plan, but as God judges," he replied, thinking that he was repeating what he had said before, and immediately continued. "Well, and you? Have you a family estate, sir? And a house? So you have abundance, then. And a housewife? And your old parents, are they still living?" he asked. And though it was too dark for Pierre to see, he felt that a suppressed smile of kindliness puckered the soldier's lips as he put these questions. He seemed grieved that Pierre had no parents, especially that he had no mother. A wife for counsel, a mother-in-law for welcome, but there's none as dear as one's own mother, said he. Well, and have you little ones? He went on asking. And Pierre's negative answer seemed to distress him, and he hastened to add, Never mind. You're young folks yet, and please God may still have some. This great thing is to live in harmony. But it's all the same now, Pierre could not help saying. Ah, my dear fellow, rejoined Karatsiev, never decline a prison or a beggar's sack. He seated himself more comfortably and coughed, evidently preparing to tell a long story. Well, my dear fellow, I was still living at home, he began. We had a well-to-do homestead, plenty of land, we peasants lived well, and our house was one to thank God for. When father and we went out mowing, there were 7 of us. We lived well. We were real peasants. It so happened, and Platon Karatsiev told a long story of how he had gone into someone's copse to take wood, how he had been caught by the keeper, had been tried, flogged, and sent to serve as a soldier. Well, lad, and a smile changed the tone of his voice, we thought it was a misfortune, but it turned out to be a blessing. If it had not been for my sin, my brother would have had to go as a soldier, but he, my younger brother, had 5 little ones, while I, you see, only left a wife behind. We had a little girl, but God took her before I was sent as a soldier. I came home on leave, and I'll tell you how it was. I look and see that they are living better than before. The yard full of cattle, the women at home, 2 brothers away earning wages, and only Michael the youngest at home. Father, he says, all my children are the same to me. It hurts the same whichever finger gets bitten. But if Platon hadn't been shaved for a soldier, Michael would have had to go. He called us all to him and said, will you believe it? Placed us in front of the icons. Michael, he says, come here and bow down to his feet. And you, young woman, you bow down too. And you, grandchildren, also bow down before him. Do you understand? He says. That's how it is, dear fellow. Fate looks for a head, but we are always judging. That's not well, that's not right. Our luck is like water in a dragnet. You pull at it, and it bulges. But when you've drawn it out, it's empty. That's how it is. And Platon shifted his seat on the straw. After a short silence, he rose. Well, I think you must be sleepy, said he, and began rapidly crossing himself and repeating, Lord Jesus Christ, Holy Saint Nicholas, Frola and Lavra, Lord Jesus Christ, Holy Saint Nicholas, Frola and Lavra, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on us and save us, he concluded, then bowed to the ground, got up, sighed, and sat down again on his heap of straw. That's the way. Lay me down like a stone, O God, and raise me up like a loaf, he muttered as he lay down, pulling his coat over him. What prayer was that you were saying? Asked Pierre. Huh? Murmured Platon, who had almost fallen asleep. What was I saying? I was praying. Don't you pray? Yes, I do, said Pierre. But what was that you said? Frola and Lavra. Well, of course, replied Platon quickly. The horses' saints. One must pity the animals too, eh? The rascal. Now you've curled up and got warm, you daughter of a bitch, said Karatsiev, touching the dog that lay at his feet, and again, turning over, he fell asleep immediately. Sounds of crying and screaming came from somewhere in the distance outside, and flames were visible through the cracks of the shed, but inside it was quiet and dark. For a long time Pierre did not sleep, but lay with open eyes in the darkness, listening to the regular snoring of Platon who lay beside him, and he felt that the world that had been shattered was once more stirring in his soul with a new beauty and on new and unshakable foundations. So that concludes my reading of chapter 271. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 271. My name is Platon. His faith in the right ordering of the universe, Tolstoy writes of Pierre today, and humanity in his own soul and in God, had been destroyed. Indeed, Pierre's belief in the utter cruelty and meaninglessness of existence now rivals that of a nauseous Jean-Paul Sartre with a stubbed toe. It's bleak. It's bleak indeed. Pierre has his reasons for this crisis of faith. His country is ruined, his friends are dead. He's just witnessed a horrible execution, and now he's a prisoner of war. Worry plagues him, and he cannot sleep, so, like someone who braves a political trending hashtag on Twitter, he opens his eyes and stares vacantly into the darkness of the abyss before him. That's one way to handle a bad situation. There is, however, another way to handle a bad situation, and that way is provided by Platon Karatev, a fellow prisoner Pierre meets today. Platon is also a prisoner of war. He also has seen his country ruined and his friends die. He's a peasant, though, so he doesn't have Pierre's rich aristocratic heritage to draw strength from. Despite being in such wretched conditions, however, he is content with his lot. It turns out Platon is an exponent of some of the practices we've advocated for here in A Year of War and Peace. Surely you'll recall Day 45's meditation from Marcus Aurelius. Quote, "As physicians have always their instruments and knives ready for cases that suddenly require their skill, so do you have principles ready for the understanding of things divine and human, and for doing everything, even the smallest, with a recollection of the bond that unites the divine and the human to each other." End quote. The instruments Platon carries around with him are pithy maxims he employs whenever confronted with hardship. Where there's law, there's injustice, he replies to Pierre's complaint of arrest. Never decline a prison or a beggar's sack, he exclaims, echoing Seneca's dictum that fire tests gold as hardship tests brave men. Reflecting on their tribulations, Platon endorses Marcus Aurelius' hard brand of fatalism, telling Pierre, "That's how it is, my kind friend. Fate looks for a head, but we are always judging. That's not good, that's not right. Our luck, my little friend, is like water in a fishnet. You tug, and it bulges. You pull it out, there's nothing there. That's how it is." Pierre, in an effort to adjust his outlook, could adopt one of our recent meditations on the importance of having a role model to pattern our behavior after. Platon Karatev appears to be a good role model. If Pierre is able to develop a character like Platon's, he'll be able to endure even the most difficult of hardships. Daily meditation. Hence the life of every man is stamped with the same character throughout, however much his external circumstances may alter. It is like a series of variations on a single theme. Author Schopenhauer, The Wisdom of Life. All right, so that concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 271. Thanks so much for listening. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. The links to all that are down below in the show notes. Tomorrow, we're going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 272 of War and Peace. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.